Hey guys, welcome back to a brand new video of PJ Codes. Now in this video, we're going to be looking at how to build a slider using React, okay? And what you see up here, what you have here is basically three components, and you can increment up by one, and it basically just increments all the way up to the number 3, okay? And we have a control component here that basically has two buttons inside it, okay? And each button either decrements or increments, okay? And very simple. So let's look at how to implement this using React. All right, and the link to the exact article where I show you how to do this in written is in the description. Make sure you check it out. It's a Medium article. I'm going to post the link. Anybody can view the link. All right, okay, and please make sure to like this video. Please take a minute right now. Just go down, hit like, hit subscribe, please. It'll really help me. Videos like these, it gives me the basically your likes and your subscribes basically motivate me to make more videos, and it really does give me a morale boost, and it definitely does help. So I'd really appreciate it if you hit the like and subscribe button. Thank you so much. All right guys, so now we have our app.js, and basically what we have, if you've noticed, is I've imported already just like a style sheet. I have 3 slider components that I built, that I created, and I imported them. And additionally, I imported a controls component. Now this controls component will have our buttons, okay, just like we saw. And here I just have something called Ola, okay, just to render something. All right, so let's begin. Let's get rid of that, and inside here, inside our component, what we're going to need is some sort of data structure that's going to basically hold our 3 components, slider 1, slider 2, and slider 3, to basically cycle through. So what better than an array, right? So let's create an array called slide array, okay? And inside of it, we're gonna dump our 3 sliders, okay? And okay, now basically what we're gonna need to cycle through these is some sort of counter, because slider 1 has index 0, slider 2 has index 1, and slider 3 has index 2. Okay, so what we can do is let's actually create the code. Let's actually write the code for our slider components. Okay, here we have our slider components. So let's just go ahead and create it. Let's do const slider. For component names, we want to start. You want to have your very first character as capital. Okay, that's just best practice. That's just convention for React components. I try to go by the Airbnb style guide. Definitely check that out. I'll leave a link in the bio for you guys. All right, so let's return a div, and let's give it a class name. This is going to be very quick. Class name called slider. Okay, we'll get back to why I'm giving it a class name, because we'll just give it some very basic styles. Okay, and let's call this slide 1. And let's just do an export default, T, and we're going to do the same thing for our slider 2 and slider 3. Okay, so let's just copy this code. Okay, all right, so we're in slider 2. Let's just paste that in. Let's call this slider 2. Okay, and let's call this slide 2. Okay, and let's actually do the same thing for slide 3. Okay, Command and D will basically auto highlight the same thing that you highlight. All right, so that's slider 3. Okay, perfect. All right guys, let's go ahead and now create our controls component, because we're gonna need the 2 buttons. Since we have our 3 slider, now we're gonna need our 2 buttons and the corresponding logic to basically increment or decrement based on our button click. All right, so let's go ahead and let's do import. Let's do our standard import. Let's do. Okay, now you can see I imported useEffect, useState, and I also have another one called useRef. And what's useRef? For those of you who don't know what useRef is, refs in React are basically hooks that you can use to reference DOM elements within the component. All right, so so it's basically, instead of using document dot get element by ID, or document dot get element by class name, or query selector all, that can get a little tricky with React sometimes, because React works with the virtual DOM. It basically references the copy of the real DOM, and it can get a little tricky. So the React docs basically encourage developers to use refs instead of the traditional vanilla JavaScript way of calling DOM elements. Okay, so now let's create a controls component, and this guy is going to take in some props, and we'll get into what those props will be, but hint, hint, it's going to be a counter. Okay, so let's just skip a line here for a second. Now we're going to need a state element to basically keep track of our count, right? Because this is a controls component. We're going to have two buttons that are going to be basically manipulating a counter variable. So we need a component state to basically keep track of that. All right, so let's do count and set count. Okay, I'm just to use state. Let's just set it, initialize it to 0. Okay, we'll get back to those in a minute. And then what we're gonna do is we're gonna create the two refs for our decrement button and our increment button. All right, so here we have our decrement button and our increment button, and we basically have created two refs for that. Okay, well, right now I'm just basically initializing everything, and down the road we're going to see how we actually use these. All right, but for now, what we're going to have to do is when the component mounts, so on use effect, inside that we're going to have our callback function, and not only when it mounts, but also when our count variable, this guy here, updates, we want to compute some logic. So this is basically like doing component update inside, while using traditional React class components. All right, if we were to leave this empty, for those of you who aren't familiar with hooks, an empty, this is called a dependency array. This array here is called a dependency array, and basically React will basically compute any logic inside here only once if this dependency array is empty. If there's something inside the dependency array, React will compute whatever logic is inside here only when one of these dependencies update. Okay, and now what we want to do is we want to check if our count is greater than or equal to 0. Okay, and I'll get to the logic here in a minute. And if count is less than 3, okay, basically we don't want our counter to be any less than 0 or any higher than the number 3, because we have 3 slides in total. Okay, and basically we want to disable our button when it's 0, when the current index is 0, and when the current index is 3. We want it to basically segment between 0 and 3. Okay, so we're gonna have to disable our button. So whatever logic happens, it's gonna have to happen inside this condition right here. Okay, now we yet don't even have a counter props that's being passed. So let's just go ahead and do that inside our app.js. Okay, now inside our app.js, what we're gonna do is we're gonna see, let's just actually create a state variable right down here. So let's do. Okay, we want to basically use this current component variable as our state. Okay, and now let's create a callback function. Let's call it count tracker, and we're going to pass this guy into our button component. Okay, so let's just, and this is going to take an account, and basically we're going to invoke, basically we're going to set the state of our current variable, set current component to whatever value we receive back from count. Okay, and we're going to take count tracker and we're going to inject it inside our controls component. Okay, right now this is going to error out because I don't have any buttons rendered, but basically what we're going to do is count, and we're going to pass in our current our count tracker function. Okay, and we're going to invoke this guy inside the controls component. This is going to basically allow us to funnel back data from our child component, which is controls, back up to app.js, and basically whatever value we get back in here, count, we're just setting it to the state of the app component, and that count variable is going to be accessible through this current component count. Okay, it sounds like a lot, but it's very, very simple. Okay, so let's go back here. Okay, and now we're going to invoke props that count. We're going to invoke that function, and we're just going to pass in our count variable. Okay, and we'll get to that in a minute. And this is just to show you, this is our count variable. This is our state variable for this component. So whatever, when we increment or decrement, basically if our count variable is greater than 0 and if it's less than 3, we're going to basically invoke the function, this guy here. We're going to invoke this count tracker function inside our controls component, to this count props. We're going to pass it in as an argument. Okay. All right. So what we're going to say is, let's take our count and let's say if our count is greater than 0. If our count is greater than 0, what we're going to do is we're going to write this in ternary. We're going to take our decrement button, and we're going to access the current property on its ref, and we're going to say we're going to set an attribute of disabled, and we're actually going to set it to false. Okay, so if our count again is greater than 0, we're going to set our decrement button, we're going to enable it. Okay, so basically, right, if it's greater than 1, then we're basically either at index 1 or 2. Okay, so we're going to enable the button. Likewise, if it's less than 0, what we're going to do is we're going to say decrement button dot current dot disabled, and we're going to set it to true. Okay, and now let's do the same sort of logic for the increment button, but this time instead of saying 0, we're going to say if our count is equal to 2, we're going to take our increment button and we're going to actually disable it. So basically here we're saying if we're on our very last slide, we want to basically disable the increment button. Okay, and likewise we're going to say otherwise we're going to set our increment, we're going to actually disable our we're going to enable, our increment button. Okay, now beneath that, let's set up the actual handlers here. So let's do handle decrement, and we're gonna do a function with an implicit return. And we're gonna take our setter here, which is set count. All right, we're gonna take set count, and then we're gonna say previous count. We're gonna take that in, and we're gonna do previous count minus 1. Okay, and we're gonna do the same thing, well, the opposite really, for our handle increment. Okay, we're gonna do handle increment, and then we're gonna do our previous count plus 1. And since we're here, down here, we're just gonna do our return. Let's return a div called with a class name section controls. Okay, so now let's go ahead and create the actual buttons here. So let's call this previous and on click. Oops, so on click. We're gonna say we're gonna invoke handle decrement. Okay, and then we're gonna take our ref and we're gonna give it a decrement. Okay, and we're gonna put a ref here of decrement button. Okay, and additionally, let's also add a class name, and this is purely for CSS. Let's give this a class name of button standard. Okay, so again, we have an on click of our handle decrement, and we have a ref that's referencing this button here called decrement button, which we initialized up here. All right, so let's do pretty much the same thing for our increment button here. Increment button, handle increment, and handle and decrement button. And let's call this guy next, and now it should actually render automatically. There we go, we have our 2 buttons here. Okay, perfect. All right, guys, so now since we have our 2 buttons here, we can see that when initially the previous is disabled, and when we hit 1, 2, it basically 2 is the last one. So index of 2, that's a third slider, it disables. Okay, and we can go back as well, and that's on 0, 1, 2, and 2, 1, 0. Okay, so now let's go back to our app component, and now here, let's actually render our slider components. Okay, so let's put curly braces so we can do some JavaScript in here, and let's create React fragment. This way we can render some actual React components. Okay, curly braces again, and we're going to take our slider array, and then we're going to basically pass in our current component. Okay, let's hit save. Let's go back. Boom, boom. There we go. All right, so we initialize it at slide 1. We hit next, slide 2, and next is slide 3. Now we're at slide number 3, which is really index 2, and we disable our next button. Okay, and as we go back, we can just keep playing around with this. You can do a lot of powerful UI stuff with this. You know, this is actually pretty cool. We can even make this automatic using set interval. But you know, before we even get into any of that, let's just add some. I have some styling here that I had put in, and I don't know why my styles haven't rendered. Oh, that's why. Because we have it as, there we go, slider, and then set controls.
Which is this guy here.
Oh, we have it as a, that's why. We have it as a, there we go. That's that, there we go. Perfect. Now it looks exactly like we saw it initially. Okay, so that's it, guys. Very, very simple. And I hope this helps. And let me know if you guys have any questions. The Medium article link to this is in the description below. So if you want to actually read about it, you can check out the Medium article. Okay, thanks a lot for watching, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Thanks.